Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari.
And I'm Stacy Moore.
And with us today is...
Jen Brown.
Hey, Jen. You want to tell the audience what movie we're going to overanalyze this week?
Murder on the Orient Express.
Which is the classic locked room murder mystery based on Agatha Christie's novel, where the renowned Belgian detective Hercule Poirot kicks off his vacation.
Nice.
Thank you. Kicks off his vacation aboard the glamorous Orient Express, only to have it interrupted by a gruesome murder mid-journey. The killer is still on the train, and only Detective Poirot can figure out who done it.
Okay. Let's first, establish off the bat, have we all seen the original?
Yes.
Yes.
Has anyone read the book?
No.
No.
Okay, good. So it's just a movie-by-movie comparison. Agatha Christie fans, we apologize.
Yeah.
All right, Jen, what did you think?
So I didn't dislike it, but I didn't really see why they made it. Like, there's nothing about it that really set it apart from the original one. And I kind of felt like it was a waste of all of the fancy people that they got to star in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, my favorite headline review. I had not read any reviews because I try not to read any reviews before we do this, but my favorite headline so far was classic, why do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. It was different. It was different. And I'll talk about we'll all talk about some of the differences, but I'm sort of with you. It was like, there wasn't really a need to remake this. No. And it wasn't different enough that it justified the remake.
I did love watching it.
I did not. I mean, I guess
No?
I would say, yes, it's different, but it's not better. It's not an improvement. So that would be sort of I just thought it was I thought that they got rid of the sort of creepy, atmospheric feel of the first one. I hated all of the weird CGI shots of the train. I thought that was just odd.
I love them.
I thought, and it sort of was reminiscent to me of Harry Potter, you know? Yeah, that's what it reminded me, which is not the vibe that you want for a murder mystery. And it was really distracting.
Yeah. That's a great point.
I mean, I did notice that, I sort of thought, okay, there's almost sort of unavoidable cliche things about trains, like shoveling coal in the boiler, chugging through the mountainside. And it was like, I guess you kind of have to have some of those shots, but every movie about a train ever has shown those sort of establishing shots, and I thought that's boring. But I did love two things
cinematographically.
Yes, thank you, Stacy, who's nailing pronunciation on this episode. I did notice, okay, so there's a long, it probably wasn't, looks like a single take shot when he first gets on the train and he meets Michelle Pfeiffer's character, Mrs. Hubbard, and she's drawing him through the train, and it's a long tracking shot.
I loved that. Yeah.
And it's she's, and just stop listening now if you don't want to know the end, because
I mean, I feel
spoiler alert.
The end of this movie and this book, I feel is kind of a cultural knowledge. I feel if you don't know, then you should thank us for informing you, because everyone knows how this story ends. Yeah.
So and then they kind of hammer hard in this version on her being the mastermind of this whole plot. So her sort of drawing him into this train and into this web of lies, I thought was great. And I liked how whenever they're talking about the murder and the victim, that you have that overhead shot, you're being filmed, everything is filmed from above, and it sort of creates that distance of we're the sort of omniscient detective ourselves overlooking everything.
I thought it was the whole movie was a warm croissant. There was nothing amazing about it. It was just nice and delightful.
Mm-hmm.
I could have watching all of the sort of the sweeping cityscapes of Istanbul in the beginning and the mountainsides. I just thought it was just so much fun to watch. And then all the period dress and all the strategically placed Godiva boxes.
Oh my gosh.
It was all just to me, I could have watched them all just sort of all these random characters having their their conversations in these glorious settings for the whole 2 hours and just watch them have like uneventfully pulled into Budapest would have been fine with me. You know?
I think no. So I'm like somewhere in between the two of you. So
yeah, I mean, I thought the point was that it was this opulent, you know, very expensive, very, you know, like train ride that you would not normally get to take. And I think there's one way to sort of establish that, but it shouldn't have been a train that you wanted to be on, you know, because there's murder. There's this weird vibe where you don't quite know what's going on, but you know something's going on. Someone's murdered on the train, you know? And so, yeah, that's what I found it really confusing, that sort of feel of, this actually seems like an awesome train to be on, because I don't think it is a train that you would want to be on. It's, you know.
It was just, it looked like a really lovely place.
Right.
Be. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Like, Harry Potter, like, it just, yeah, it was bizarre.
Okay.
And I do think definitely in the screening that I was in, there were definitely people who I'm pretty sure had not seen it. Like seeing this guy out of the corner of my eye, and he was towards the end of the movie when you're sort of finding out who did it. He was literally on the edge of his seat, like literally on the edge of his seat. He was leaned forward. He had his hands in his face. And I also heard someone sniffling behind me during part of the, you know, sort of the big climax scene where they're talking about why, you know, what happened. So I think part of it for me, I will say, is that I'd seen the original, and so I already kind of knew the story. And because there wasn't anything that really hooked me, I wasn't drawn into it. But perhaps if I didn't know the story, then I might have felt a little differently, if that makes sense. Like if I would have just been hooked on the mystery and trying to, you know, follow the clues and figure out who did it, maybe I would have been a little more positive about it.
Okay. I think so. A couple things for me in terms of the mystery, and then I want to do like a discussion of Poirot himself.
And we got to talk about the cast at some point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean we have to. And then can I just all right.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So one, I really respect the fact someone had like posted on Twitter some sort of pithy line about everybody acts like people of color didn't exist before like
after the Civil War, and before Martin Luther King.
Yeah, they're like, it's like you see a period piece and that's... And I was like, Kenneth Branagh literally threw like as diverse a cast at this. Like every scene with extras or whatever, I noticed he made a real effort at diversity. I want to applaud that. I will say, I thought it was sort of hilarious how much chatter there was after Selma came out, after Get Out came out, about all these Black British actors stealing American jobs. And then I was like, and then we have Leslie Odom Jr., who did a great job and had an absolutely terrible English accent. I was like,
it was not
the
great.
one time we needed a Black English actor.
And they did
we
not.
went American.
Yeah.
They're all in California. I don't know what the problem is.
But I appreciated making that character Black. And then one of the characters in the original film is Italian. And it sort of works in the discrimination against Italian, but they made him Mexican.
Which is like the equivalent of today's.
It definitely felt like they tried to bring
I think that's true. And I think that's something that I've just noticed overall with movies and TV this year is just more of an effort to have more diverse casts. And I definitely appreciate that. Even if I, you know, didn't particularly care for the movie.
Yeah.
I did love the cast, though.
Oh, whoever that guy was playing
Minus
the
Johnny
chauffeur. Humana. Like, I'm like, I need to go IMDb every movie you've been in.
He was in Magnificent Seven.
He was hot.
I wondered about him, too.
I remembered him. And he, like, in Magnificent Seven, he was, like, not likable and not particularly charming, but I remember thinking, you're an attractive guy. But let's go through the whole cast, right? So there was Kenneth Branagh, who I thought was glorious.
Yes.
As Poirot. We have Michelle Pfeiffer, who basically spent the whole movie going, bitches, I'm back. Right? Which I'm on board with.
It's been her big comeback year this year.
She's no Lauren Bacall, though.
No, she's not.
Oh, no, you're not. Like, Lauren...
But who is? Who
no,
I
can
know.
fill
Lauren Bacall's shoes today?
Yeah. So I thought Michelle Pfeiffer did a credible job, but it was very, that one part in particular was like, she's no Lauren Bacall.
Like, you're not. Sorry,
Yeah.
lady. But she's probably the best we have.
Michelle Pfeiffer? I
This
wouldn't say
particular
so.
role?
No.
That's okay. So
Anyway.
then, who else we have? We have,
There's Penelope Cruz,
Penelope
who I haven't seen in a
Cruz.
really long time.
who was fine.
Yeah, she was fine. I was happy to see. I was happy to see everyone that I hadn't seen in a while that was in this cast.
Willem Dafoe, I actually got giddy when he showed up because I forgot he was in it.
He did a good job. I was
Fantastic.
pleasantly surprised. Two perennial Branagh favorites, Derek Jacobi and Judi Dench,
Okay.
have both been in movies with him before. Derek Jacobi has been in like almost every movie he's ever made.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Josh Gad.
Josh Gad, yep. I have no feelings about him one way or
I'm
another.
pretty neutral about him. He did fine.
Whomever played I don't know who played the assistant to Judi Dench. Sorry.
Oh yeah, and
I've seen
I
her
recognize
in
her
things,
from British TV. I
Right,
feel like it's
yeah,
the lady who was in
right.
Broadchurch.
Oh, might be.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got Daisy Ridley, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And Leslie Odom Jr., who you mentioned, whom when he first started speaking, all I could hear was Aaron Burr of Hamilton, but eventually forgot about it.
I mean, I really like him as an actor, but I will call out anybody and everybody for having terrible accents. Like, it's just distracting. It pulls me out of the movie every
It did a little
time,
bit,
like,
a little
because it just hits a dissonant note. So,
Oh, and I can't believe I haven't mentioned yet, Johnny Depp.
I thought you were saving that one for last.
Used to absolutely, like, I mean, what a great utilization of someone whom everyone cannot stand right now.
right.
Is to have him stabbed to death in the
Yeah.
first 20
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, I was a little bit like, ooh, Johnny Depp is in this movie. And then I sat down and it started rolling. I was like, oh, he's the victim. I'm okay.
Yeah. I just don't really want to see Johnny Depp in any movie. I haven't
Me
really,
neither.
and I
Right
haven't really since like he just started making like those Pirates of the Caribbean movies endlessly, and he just is,
He just became a character.
Yes, exactly. He
Caricature of
became
himself.
Yeah.
So, no issues with the cast, but I do want to talk. Okay, so one of the things about this movie overall was that it was a much more emotional movie than the first one. The first one plays it really straight, and it gives you this sort of establishing Poirot character and mustache that David Suchet then parlayed into like years on the BBC, in which I think all of them on PBS
Wow.
because like my dad loves all those Agatha Christie murder mystery things.
Sure.
So I thought it was interesting. I thought they make Poirot a much more likable, more character in this retake, but I was extremely annoyed with the Yucky Love stuff.
I pretty much would tune out every time he would start talking about his share.
Oh,
kettle.
yeah.
Oh my god, that was
Yes.
so annoying.
I was like, I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, it was bad. Especially because Kenneth Branagh just played that part in a much warmer way. Like, he just brought a ton of warmth to that character that you didn't then need a scripted, like, look, he's likable. He's not this, like, fussy
He has an
guy.
old girlfriend.
Yeah, like,
You have to like him.
Yeah, he did it through acting, and I was like, for someone who's played SS soldiers a lot in movies, like, he can be icy cold, and he chose not to play it that way. So I liked the warmer Poirot, but then I hated the histrionics. That end scene was the worst thing. Like, it kind of ruined the movie for me.
I made a loud groaning noise.
Where? Exactly.
The part where he says, "Oh, I've been called to," I forget exactly how he said it, but something, "I've been called to Cairo for something," and I thought, "Oh no, please tell me they're not going to do Death on the Nile. Like, they're not going to try to make this."
that end scene, okay.
I thought they were trying to make it like a series or a franchise. I'm not sure if that's correct. I didn't read anything, but that was my impression of the Cairo line, is that they were gonna.
Oh, I thought it was just an Easter egg for fans.
Okay.
But I can see your point now that you're bringing it up.
Because I don't even remember. I don't even remember if that was the same detective. I don't. But I just. Yeah.
I had no idea that there was a novel called that, but when they said it, I went, "Oh, that must be the next novel."
Yeah.
It was said. It was just punched so hard.
Yeah,
like, wink,
exactly.
wink.
Yeah.
The Nile. I was like, got it.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, I do think in general, most British murder mysteries are very sort of nihilist, and it's all very funny that people are being killed. It's supposed to be kind of fun, right? And they never actually make it, because otherwise, how could you enjoy yourself watching a story about someone being stabbed to death? This was far more emotional. It was about like violence and the ripples that one violent act can have on so many lives, and how it can destroy people, and that violence begets violence. It got really into it in a sincere way.
Yeah, that absolutely came through, I would say, in both. Yeah,
and the score was a lot more emotional as well. Like the music was, again, you know, so I was talking to a friend about the original who clued me into the fact that apparently Sidney Lumet was like, every time anybody films a train, it's got some like rhythmic beat that it's hitting, and he wanted to do something differently, and it's all the train scenes in the original are scored to a waltz, as if the train is waltzing down the tracks. Okay. And I was like, that's super cool. So I was very much paying attention to like where they use the score, and again, they made Poirot warmer, they made the score much more emotional, and then you had this ending scene of the Mrs. Hubbard admitting that she's the mom, and then this dramatic like gunpoint. He has this whole histrionics about like, I don't know what to do. The only way you can get away with this is just to shoot me. And then I was like, we've gone off the rails, people. Like this is
very not British.
This is stupid. Like I really didn't like it, and they kind of had me up till there.
I found their the scene. I actually did sniffle, referring back to you heard someone sniffling. I did sniffle during the scene where we're actually watching them commit the murder in the flashback.
Me too.
In a way that I didn't in the original, because I felt like you were really feeling how destroyed these people were, and how they had really, in this last moment, they were completing their own self-destruction, that they had just lost themselves. And especially when Michelle Pfeiffer is holding up that last knife and kind of trembling before she does it, and I was like, you're actually killing yourselves right now, and that was very heartrending to me. But then cutting to their whole Last Supper setup in the tunnel, and then of course all the like pointing the pistol here and then pointing. I didn't, and as part and parcel of that, I did not find his crisis of faith fascinating at all. I was like, oh my gosh, there isn't just right and wrong. Some things are gray. I'm like, well done, Poirot. Good for you. Yeah. This is not interesting.
And I understood the point they were trying to make, but I agree. It was just a bit overdone.
It was very melodramatic in a way that most British murder mysteries are much drier and more subtle. Yeah,
it just felt like they put more resources than needed to be into this movie, you know. I think that was part of it just looked so glossy and so, and I just don't, for something where it's plot driven, it's really almost like a play. I just don't really see why you need to spend this much money, I was thinking of, how Joss Whedon did that Much Ado About Nothing, sort of just at his house after the Avengers. And I was just thinking, really, with something like this, you could have just had a set and just had it be sort of more like a play almost, rather than, just all that they put into it. It just all felt like too much to me. And I don't really, because really at the end of the day, it's about the story. And there's not a whole lot you can do with a story that unfolds on a train, which is, except for more shots of the train, more Godiva chocolate, and so.
It's literally a locked room mystery. It was pretty grand for what should have been in one room.
Right.
I agree.
But as I said before, I loved all the grandiosities.
I'm with you. And I'm like, someone needed to get the costume award.
Yes.
I did enjoy the costumes.
His mustache should get an award.
Yes.
Just the mustache.
I'm glad they went in a completely different direction with it too. The one thing I did like though is the original movie is literally just a straight line. He interviews one person after the other, after the other, after the other. And you already know from the opening scenes about the Daisy Armstrong kidnapping. I liked the back and forth and the intermingling and the slow reveals, I was like, the twists and turns and meanders along the way. I think that's why I wasn't so bored having just seen the original one again. I was like, oh, you did a better job of like intermingling this story and keeping, it was so dry in the first one.
The first one was dry, I will say that.
Mm-hmm. And also sort of geographically too was more diverse, right? They weren't just on the train car a lot of the time. Like, he even takes one of them out into the snow with a little tea set outside to interview her out there. At one point, like he's chasing someone through the apparatus of the bridge. Mm-hmm. They tried to make it more visually interesting as well.
Yes, they did. But yeah, like I said, I did enjoy it.
I didn't think it needed to be.
Yeah,
I guess that's my point. I thought, what I want is that basically that sort of morality tale that you're getting.
Right.
I'm thinking about, like you were saying, the way that a crime sort of reverberates and,
Right.
Which I guess in that sense, it's sort of fitting that, you had Johnny Depp in the role.
Yes. So to that point, I do think, like Stacy, you said, like this movie, this story is really famous, is like, I don't know all of Agatha Christie's oeuvre, but this is the one where they all get away with it, right? Like, first, there's not just one murderer, it's everybody did it. Everybody has a motive, and then everybody ends up doing it. And then he chooses to let them go. And that's kind of what that's why the story is one of her more timeless ones. And I guess, he has his big crisis of faith, like, about whether or not they should get away with it, which he doesn't have in the first one. He's just like, well, I have two options. Option one, I let you all go, and you have your convenient lie that you created for me, or option two, like, I don't. And he's like, I think option one sounds good. And you're like, okay, sounds good to me too. Like, how do you feel about the ending, the morality of it?
Well, I thought that's why sort of having him have this crisis of faith. I mean, it was a bit overdone, but I thought that's why it was a good thing to have. I guess I did like him sort of putting them in the position of saying, well, you thought, if you think that it's acceptable to take a life under any circumstance, then you would clearly, like, do you think it's acceptable to take my life? Like, I enjoyed that sort of parallel that he made. I think that was the point he was trying to make. Well, if you think it's okay to kill, then, is it okay to kill me? Like, is it, So I did enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah. I had a huge problem with it.
Did you?
I did. And in a way that I don't recall feeling when I watched the original, the 1974 one. For some reason, this time, I was just appalled. Not that I thought they were evil people or anything. They were clearly just really tortured people who were not dealing with their grief, right? But I just felt, at the end of the day, I felt like if you don't want to turn people in for being murderers, don't be a detective. Like if that's unpleasant for you, if you feel like you need to make the call every single time on whether or not it was a justified murder, you shouldn't be a detective. You should be a judge, But
I thought that's what was so striking, was that he really did struggle with that,
He did, and I felt like it was, and this is against, obviously this is getting into Agatha Christie's original novel, but I felt like it was inconsistent with the character they presented up to that point, where they were saying, like, I see the world as it should be, which is why I see the flaws. It's right or it's wrong. And then he goes, you know what? Actually, I'm gonna decide what's right or wrong. I'm gonna make the call. It's like, it's not your call to make. You're the detective.
No, that's a fair point.
Your job. And when Penelope Cruz's character, her missionary character, says, I thought you came to seek justice. And no, that's not what a detective does. A detective uncovers truth. He does not seek justice. He uncovers truth. And they could have turned Cassetti in. They clearly were very smart, people to orchestrate this entire thing. They could have drugged him and handcuffed him and turned him in, but they didn't. They all wanted to feel better, and they thought they would feel better if they stabbed him to death. And you don't feel better by stabbing someone to death. And that is, indicated by Michelle Pfeiffer being Linda Arden, trying to take her life afterwards because she doesn't feel any better. And that's why you don't let people do that.
Right.
For their sake as much as anyone else's.
Yeah, so a few thoughts out of order, but interestingly, I alluded to this in former episodes. I was on an extremely brutal murder case as a juror this past summer. The sentencing came out, and the person that we convicted got 60 years, which seemed low to me and everyone I know. And
considering what you'd seen.
It begged the question of if, brutally murdering 2 people doesn't get you life in prison, what does? It just seemed like, what would he have had to have... That part was a little baffling, and because of what we all know about the criminal justice system, I was a little concerned that possibly money had a play in a lighter sentence.
Oh my God.
Just wondered if because he was kind of a more well-off person that... But, so for me, when I thought about it, justice was served when the 12 of us said, you are a murderer. You killed these people. Forever and always, you are to blame. And that then the sentence was, which is sort of why they divide the 2 things. The sentence was about punishment or rehabilitation, whatever it is we think we're doing with jail time, which I don't know, and that's a separate podcast.
Sure.
But, I was justice was served when we named him as a murderer. And that was my job to do, and to keep the victims in mind as a juror. And so this movie definitely has a very conflicted view of, like you said, what is justice, who gets to mete it out, whose job is it to mete it out, and is vengeance ever justice? But what I was thinking about too in terms of vengeance is it's funny to me that we are in the dawn of the every 5 minutes there's another superhero movie. Who are vigilantes, right? And I was sort of it's funny that we have all of these superhero movies, and this is a movie that really questions what vengeance is worth and who gets to take the law into their own hands. So I was ironic.
Yeah, and a great sort of intersection there would be Logan, right? Harkening back to our discussion on Logan, he, at least in that movie, they pointed out, I only kill bad people. Well, just the same.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
I'm a little disappointed, guys. I thought I was going to get a lot of resistance on this from you two.
Oh, you will.
No,
get ready.
I think you made a really good point, and I don't think that necessarily. I would push back against the idea that they killed him to make themselves feel better. I don't think that there was necessarily a rational motive behind what they did. I don't think vengeance is necessarily a rational thing. I think of it as as a lashing out, as an outpouring of anger more than anything else. And so, I guess I just don't quite think of it the same way. So I certainly think there's a difference between what we might call justice and what we call vengeance, or what we call revenge.
Right. So I'm solidly in the pro-revenge camp.
All right. Okay, Magneto.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I just, in terms of people were it doesn't do any good. It was have you ever had revenge on somebody? Because it feels awesome.
Right, but it doesn't. I mean, when you look at the sort of reverberations of this crime, none of this changes that. None of this brings back the girl who was killed, or it doesn't change any of that.
But it can feel really good. It could make them feel better of he destroyed all these lives and I had the satisfaction and the unit and the solidarity of everyone. I think part of what really is part of why this is sort of the exception in the universe
of Poirot, you mean?
Yeah, and is that all do it together. It is, it's a jury of your peers. It is a group of people who said the thing to do in this situation, we're all in this together, is to take this man's life for what he has wrought. And I think, this does present a case where he could have been prosecuted, but I'm certainly, I don't know. If I were Michael Brown's mom,
I think that's a very good. It's a very literal sentence of death. In terms of having all of these people stab him to death, you know?
Right. I was just thinking of cases where justice isn't ever going to be meted out. Like I said, if I were Michael Brown's mom, I might just be like, mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then your child is still dead at the end of the day, you know? And so I think that's what
dead too.
you know, I think that's the...
Yeah, I do want to say that while I feel very strongly about what is right and what is wrong in this case, I am certainly not above what is wrong. And Nicole, to your point, I'm sorry, if someone killed someone I cared about in broad daylight, they would disappear.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I sort of identify with his ambivalence about it, you know?
Right.
Because I do certainly understand that impulse, and I have loved ones, and you know what I mean? Where I get it, but I also, you know.
Although if I was caught, I hope a detective would turn me in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
But what if you accidentally, like, ran over someone's child, you know? Like, you were driving and you had an accident and, you know, that person still lost their child and they kill you. You know, like, does it matter? Like, either way.
Of course. Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And
yeah.
so
It does.
just,
Okay, so I guess what I would say is this. While I certainly think it would just be anarchy and problematic for everyone to become a vigilante, and I fully support the justice system, but I also would say I think the person who does it should be prosecuted as well. But I have a hard time with moral condemnation for the act of doing it. Like, I do understand why somebody would do it, and while two wrongs don't make a right, I'm not a religious person, so I'm not someone who necessarily believes that justice is going to come in an afterlife either, right. Which, you know, many people believe in, and that's, you know, I mean, no disrespect to that belief, but without that belief, I'm a little bit like, well, we got the here and now, and you need to go. Like, right. You're a terrible human being. So... yeah, I guess that's it. I don't say that it's right, but in terms of, like, as a society, we cannot do this, but I'm not full of moral condemnation for what they did.
Right.
Sure. I say the only thing to tack on to that, for sort of my perspective on this, is there's also the local Turkish guy that could get scapegoated for this now. Mm-hmm. Because they decided to say, no, it wasn't all these mostly rich white folks on this train. It was just some local stranger. Mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm. And, like, you know, who's going to get scapegoated for that?
Right. Yeah. I know. I would say I think that my favorite aspect of just the story in general is the illustration of how one crime can touch so many different people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, again, something that's been a struggle for me, is that, you know, the prosecution, for better for worse, in the trial that I was in, like, they did a pretty good job of at least letting us get to know one of the victims in particular, the other one remain more a mystery, but it's like, you know, now I'm like, you know, I carry those victims in my heart now. Like, I had no personal association other than being a juror in their trial, and we talked about it as jurors, and we all felt really strongly like, the prosecution is here to represent the state. The defense is there to represent the defendant, and we are here to represent the victims. Like, that was our role as jurors, is to hold those two young men in our hearts and to do the right thing for them. And it's...
So when they give you the instructions, is there any sort of... Do they talk to you about that? Do they tell you that you're... Like, how do they define your role in terms of your job?
It's just the facts, ma'am. It's our job to understand the law. Like, we're very much...
So you're representing the law, or, you know, are you...
We're representing the citizens of D.C. I mean, to be frank.
Right,
like,
that would be, that's what I'm
we're
saying.
supposed to do, sort of as the prosecution.
Jury of your peers.
But when you're in it...
Any lawyers listening are going to...
Yeah, no.
Like,
you know, it wasn't like jury nullification.
Apologies to philosophy majors and lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, that isn't our job, but as a human being, when you're in that courtroom and
how can you not?
That's the only thing that sort of makes sense as your job to do, is to speak for the people who cannot speak for themselves. And it, again, I'm haunted by it, and their deaths will be with me forever, because crime really does reverberate out. Like,
affects so many, you know?
Violence begats violence. I forget what verse that is.
Yeah.
I'm not literate enough in Bibleology to tell you where that is, but
either.
And I don't know. I don't know. I guess it sort of gets into like death penalty stuff too. Like, because I don't have a religious background and because our justice system is set up as the state gets to decide, I don't necessarily have a problem with the philosophy that the state gets to decide that you're not fit to live anymore.
You do not have a problem with it.
Not philosophically.
Right.
I'm not, like, on pure theory, I'm not against the death penalty. I don't know that I'm for it, but I'm not like, how can the state ever decide that? I'm like, because the state sets up a lot of things about our lives. Because the state says you don't own your children enough that you can beat them. Like, the state makes all kinds of decisions for us that, you know, we don't get to make for ourselves. Having said that, it's definitively more expensive, not a deterrent, and racist. So,
those things aside, though.
Yeah. But that's a great point. Like, at what point does it become righteous to take a human life? Is it okay when the state says yes? Is it okay when Linda Arden decides to get her friends together on a train?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure I'm for it in any case, but then again, I've never
and I think
anybody.
Right, and if it's okay for her, then why isn't it okay for me or for you or, you know? And I think that's the, you know.
It would be anarchy.
It would be anarchy.
Well, I just want to mention how much I loved some one-liners from Kenneth Branagh's Poirot.
Okay.
Namely being, if you do choose to take a life, two people will know. Your God and Hercule Poirot. And then also when he says, I may be the best detective in the world.
Yeah.
I loved how just outlandish it was and he pulled it off.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, and I think in the, because you were talking about how they sort of made him a bit warmer than, and I feel like I in some ways I kind of appreciate, I feel like we've gone so far on the sort of Sherlock Holmes like trope with the antisocial but genius, and so I kind of did appreciate that they gave him a little bit more of a, although I feel like having the, you know, loved one lost is very cliched.
Yeah, that was just,
like,
I mean,
as awful as it is, I think of Monk. Did you ever watch Monk?
I did not. Did he have like, a little picture in his billfold?
Well, he had the mystery that was always gnawing at him was his beloved wife Trudy, who was murdered. It's the mystery he couldn't solve, but it's a common, you know,
trope.
Yeah, to humanize.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, a kid or a wife.
And why does it always have to be a dead woman to humanize, you know, a jerk?
A man
like for life,
you're saying that, and I'm like totally reminded of watching the most excellent movie called Murder by Death. It's a Neil Simon comedy, and it's a send-up satire of all these great detectives. So in the movie, like the Perrier is his name. The Poirot character, Perrier, like his great tragedy, like he has this like super like emotional moment. It's like he took Marie-Louise Colette. And someone goes, "Your sweethearts?" And he goes, "My poodle."
What's a poodle?
A poodle. A dog.
Such a ridiculous accent.
Right, okay.
And he's like, they handed me back her bloody collar. Like, it's hilarious. And I'm like, yeah, I could have had a beloved poodle. Why not?
Bloody collar.
Make it a pet. Like,
and I hate
up a little bit.
He used that cane to great effect, I thought. He was always, you know, absolutely using that cane effectively.
Yeah.
To stop, like thieves and everything else.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I think you're right. We have gone very far over into the Sherlock, like, clinical, emotionless robot detective.
Yeah, and it's like, well, maybe he could just be a little bit less of a jerk. You know? Like, it's, but he's a genius. It's, you know, gets a little old at times.
It really does.
And do you think that maybe there's an element of, part of the reason that they did make him a little bit warmer and a little bit more likable is because that is less acceptable now, you know, to have just this complete asshole and have us be like, oh, but he's a genius. Like, maybe in 2017, like, that's just a little more, people are just a little less okay with it.
Not as much of a crowd pleaser.
Right. It's not as much of just an accepted thing.
I
I don't know if that's true.
I mean, again, tweet us if it's which characterization is more based on the book, but I think he full on needed to own that character in a different way. Like,
that's fair.
I think, again, David Suchet very much modeled his Poirot after what Albert Finney created in Murder on the Orient Express, and I just think the mustache needed to be different. He needed to be somewhat different. He needed to inhabit that character in a different way.
Yeah, I will say I didn't fully buy him as a detective.
How so?
I thought he was a little too quirky, like, but not in a I am a genius noticing everything kind of way. Like, it was almost like you know how there's this sort of fine line between like a portrayal of like a really, really great detective and a magician, you know, where it's almost like it's magic. Like, how can he see everything? Mm-hmm. And with his character, I felt a little bit more on the magic side than on the like, you know what I'm like, than like it's just the pure power of observation because he's got this intense focus despite everything else, if that makes sense.
There was a lot of presto element.
Yeah.
So especially just his opening scene, right, of catching that thief with the relic. You know, it was almost like, ta-da! I caught the thief. So I can sort of see what you're saying.
I can see what you're saying, and I definitely base, like, because you're not given any of the information up front that you are given in the original one. Like, there's no way you could have solved this mystery for yourself. Mm-hmm. You couldn't have outthunk Poirot. He had information that you didn't have. Mm-hmm. So,
but it's like the believing that he would observe it and the like, well, no person could ever possibly observe that. He's a wizard. You know, like there's something about that like I just didn't fully buy it.
Okay. I did.
I'm a Kenneth Branagh fangirl. So
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I like him. No, I like him a lot.
Big time.
Talk about fan linking. I'll
yeah, I mean,
I'll defend him.
There's so much to. I was thinking, it was like, we could do this whole podcast and all the stuff about Kenneth Branagh that I love, which is sad. All right. Well, do you want to wrap this up with our social impact score?
Let's do it. Let's give it a social impact score. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being it changes nothing, 10 being the world we once knew was gone forever. You want to go first?
All right, I'm going to go with I'll say a 4.
Whoa, high.
Is that high?
Coming in hot.
I was trying to be generous because I was so down on the movie.
Be down.
All right.
Cynicism is welcome here.
Okay, then I'll give it a 2.
Okay.
I would say, on the one hand, I do appreciate the diversity of the cast. But really, as far as it goes as a film, there's not really anything here that would change my worldview. I guess unless you had a really, intense conversation about justice and the death penalty, which I'm not sure that
anyone's going to do.
Right. I think people say, can you believe it? That's how it happened? And
that's why you come to this podcast.
Right.
That's right.
So
we'll overanalyze.
Unless then if there's a whole slew of kinder, warmer, gentler detectives, you're gonna eat that social impact score.
Yeah.
Sure, anyway, go ahead.
Sure. As much as I enjoyed, sort of the warmer, fun aspect and period piece aspect of it, I give it a 1. It changes nothing.
I'm gonna give it a 2 because it's a remake, so whatever needed to be changed was changed already. But remarkable diversity casting, showing how you can do it, how you can put people of color in a period piece where they just really haven't been present at all. I'll give it a notch up from 1 for that. And I hope it does change things. I hope people are like, oh, we can create worlds that aren't full of white people. Mm-hmm. Okay, recommendations.
Well, I would say if you liked Willem Dafoe in this, you should see Florida Project, which was really great.
I haven't seen it yet.
Here.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to make a recommendation. I've been biting my tongue on this whole time. So, again, total Kenneth Branagh fangirl. He has used, to my knowledge, Patrick Doyle to write the music for every single one of his films. And his very first film that he directed, Henry V's score by Patrick Doyle, is literally my favorite piece of music ever. See the movie. You'll get a 15-year-old Christian Bale doing Shakespeare. And just listen to the music, go on Spotify and listen to it. It's so beautiful and amazing.
In lieu of a recommendation,
Uh-huh.
I realized recently that my opening to our episode on It was basically me doing an impression of Karina Longworth.
Nice.
From the podcast, You Must Remember This, and I realized I should probably give her credit for that I was actually channeling her for that first musical intro.
Very cool. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. If you did, please take a second to leave a review on iTunes and recommend it to your friends. Check out our website and our show notes for links to things we've discussed. And if you want to talk to us, leave a comment on our Facebook page or on Twitter with our tag @MoviesMatterPod. Also check Twitter to find out what movie we're overanalyzing next. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.